The nice thing about a sports bike is this is in my opinion, the ultimate expression of my hobby of motorcycling. The problem is it comes with its risks and its expenses, right? So in order for me to utilize these motorcycles to the best of their capability, you need a racetrack. That's going to come with time. That's going to come with money. That's going to come with ability. But your ability to take your cruiser and go on a road trip, that's just a matter of setting up a group chat, who's in for a ride, hit the road and come back. So that's my justification to having multiple types of motorcycles.
Welcome to Riding Counsel with Rich Jaffe, where the open road meets expert advice. I'm Richard Jaffe, an attorney and biking enthusiast, and this is the podcast where we dive into the world of motorcycling, safety, culture, charitable giving, and riding right. So, whether you're a seasoned rider or just getting started, let's talk bikes, the road, and everything in between. Let's ride! All right. So hello out there, ridingcounsel.com family. Thanks a lot for listening. As you should know, or for new listeners, I am Rich Jaffe. I am a personal injury attorney. I am a podcaster, and I am a bike motorcycle enthusiast. And I have an amazing guest with me today. His name is Marco Auriti, and he's going to talk about things today that I honestly have no idea what this world is about. So I'm really interested in it. I hope you are interested just like I am. Marco, thanks a lot for coming on my show. Thank you for being here and your time. And just tell me who you are, what you do, what you like about it, where you do it. Tell me everything.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. My name's Marco Auriti. I'm by full-time profession, I work for Filippo Berio, which is a prominent Italian olive oil company. We've been importing and distributing olive oil for over 100 years in the United States. But obviously, as you can tell from the background, motorcycling for me is probably my predominant passion. So, background-wise, my family immigrated to the United States in the 1970s. Both my parents, my mother had family here in the United States, but I grew up fortunate enough to travel back to Europe every summer, where I would spend, summers with cousins, aunts, uncles, and everything. And a really specific influence there for me was, motorcycling as a culture is different, obviously, in Europe than it is here in the United States. Which had a profound impact on me simply because, I'm trying to emulate family and relatives and friends in Italy that were riding motorcycles or riding Vespas or riding dirt bikes. Obviously, I wanted to have something to do with it as well. And, from a governmental perspective and from a cultural perspective, there's an interesting dynamic in Europe and specifically in Italy that's different from here in the United States, is the fact that in Europe and in Italy, you have what are, let's say, tiered levels of motorcycle licensing and introduction. So at the age of 14, I was legally able to operate a motorcycle on Italian roads. Although it was a 50cc motorcycle, it was, let's say 80% of the size of either of the motorcycles on either side of me. And basically every 2 years, you basically graduated up in displacement. So at 14 years old, you're able to ride a 50cc. At 16 years old, you're able to ride a 125cc. At 18 years old, you can ride a 250cc. And then at 21 years old, basically it's an unlimited displacement of 1,000, 1,200, 1,400. So that really creates a riding culture in which you grow into your vehicles, you respect its capacity rather than here in the United States, and especially here in New York. Really, at 17 years old, you get a learner's permit, you take your road test, and you can go into any dealership, whether it's a Harley cruiser, whether it's a sports bike, and hop on anything and ride off. So, my introduction to motorcycling and riding culture was, let's say, staggered and stepped, and really has put me in the position where I am now as a rider, where, this year I'm going to be 40 years old, and I've I've essentially been riding for, let's call it 30 of those 40 years of my life, where there was a 50cc of my grandfather's and my dad taught me on when I was 10 years old, up to, the motorcycles that I have today.
This episode has been brought to you by Riding Counsel. Don't forget to visit us at ridingcounsel.com.
Wow. I mean, it sounds a lot more reasonable. This graduating thing that you're describing, it makes a hell of a lot more sense than what we do here in the States. I mean, I think it's pretty similar in all the states. You could be 16, 17 years old, and you could go buy like this crazy, bike, like I don't know, a turbo or something, and just go really hurt yourself and hurt everybody else and really get out of control. I mean, it sounds so much reasonable.
Yeah. And, an additional professional detail in my background, I was a sales manager at the Vespa dealership in Brooklyn for a number of years. So, I was hands-on in the vehicle selling process, and there were, numerous times that for our clients at the dealership, it wouldn't be very far from reality that you would find me under the BQE overpass, giving them lessons on how to ride their Vespas, right? So, it was really important, both for me and for us as a dealership, to make sure that their introduction into riding was a, safe and conscious one, simply because, your first ride is really what opened, and if it's done safely and properly, is your gateway into a whole other different lifestyle that you never really knew before. But Richard, like you said, I had plenty of customers that, took a road test and came in and wanted to buy a 180 horsepower, 200 horsepower, 220 horsepower sports bike. And, all you could do from a legal perspective was just recommend that they take a safety course, and ride within their riding ability. And of course, with that intention, and both motorcycling as a hobby and a sport, that evolved into my involvement with, participating in track days as well, which is probably what many would consider, the ultimate expression of sports bike riding.
Okay. Marco, I'm dying to talk about your bikes behind you. You gotta tell me about these things. They look like incredible machines. Tell me, do you ride these things, or are they just for show?
No, I mean, I think you'll agree with me when, as men, we don't let our toys go away. They just get bigger and more expensive. So, I'm a big fan of the early 2000s eras of motorcycles. So basically 1998, 1999 through the early 2000s. So, on this side of me is a 2002 Aprilia RSVR. And on this side is a Ducati 996, a bit of a Frankenstein project of mine. And both of these bikes were incredibly popular and successful, simply for the fact that for motorcycle sales, and this kind of trickles into, sports car sales as well. Really, the development and sales of these vehicles are to justify manufacturers going racing. So the two models that I have next to me were built by Aprilia or by Ducati in order for them to participate in a specific motorcycle racing series. So in their era of 2001 and 2002, these were, the cream of the crop of motorcycles that they can offer. And of course, these were motorcycles that I had as posters in my bedroom growing up. So, compared to today's standards, they're absolutely, let's call it, rough around the edges. They don't have, any technology. There's no traction control. There's no wheelie control. There's no, any traction control you have is literally how smooth you are in your throttle application. They're about, they're like me. They're maybe 30 or 40 pounds, a little bit too heavy than they should be. But, they are, for me, timeless designs. You go to a coffee shop on a Sunday, and if you park next to a $45,000 Ducati Panigale or a $25,000 brand new RSV4, these will pull attention just as much as those do, and that's kind of the camaraderie of the sport, right?
So how much do these things weigh?
Don't hold me to this, but they're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 420 to 430 wet.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm a touring guy. I ride a Harley. I ride a Road Glide. You're talking about 800 pounds and then
Yeah.
everything else on top of it. I mean, God, this is half the weight.
Yeah, and the because of them having a sports riding and performance focus, the less amount of weight that you can have lower to the ground, the better it is. So both of the bikes that I have, depending on the motorcycle that you ride, I'm pretty sure yours might be like bicycle spoked wheels, if I'm not mistaken. These are forged aluminum wheels. So what does that mean? The rim, both the front and rear rims, are cast from a single piece of aluminum, making the wheels as light as possible that help in the maneuverability as well. 30 to 40% of the bodywork is carbon fiber. So that's obviously going to provide you a reduction in weight while keeping, structural integrity. And then aftermarket exhausts, whether they be, carbon fiber or titanium, is obviously going to help you try to shave as much of that weight as possible, with the focalization on, performance and handling.
Wow. So, all right. So can you talk to me a little bit about horsepower and torque? First of all, I mean, I have my own ideas about what horsepower and torque is, but you're a lot smarter than me, a lot more educated on motorcycle things. So just what is your concept? What is horsepower? What is torque? How do they differ?
Yeah, I mean, I think the engineer's explanation is torque is what gets you from a stopped motion to it's a pushing motion, and then horsepower is a pulling motion. I think when you talk about horsepower, the irony is the two motorcycles that I have, next to me and you'll hear motorcyclists talk about how a vehicle or a motorcycle makes power, right? Ironically, how your motorcycle makes power and how these two motorcycles make power have similar power profiles, because I believe both your motorcycle and these motorcycles are both V twins, right? So you hear, there's a lot of discussion in the marketplace regarding what you ride, and more specifically, what the engine configuration is. So your motorcycle, these two motorcycles are both V twins. So anything in any V twin, whether it's your cruisers or some of these older style bikes, they are predominantly torque driven rather than horsepower driven. They don't necessarily rev as high as your typical inline four-cylinder would. So the red line on your bike, I'd imagine being somewhere in the, who knows, maybe 6,000 to 7,000 RPM range. These guys rev a little higher to maybe anywhere between 9,000 to 10,000. But they are known for kind of what you would describe as pulling you off the line. So a lot of that impact in throttle is going to be in that torque curve between 1,500 to 1,700 RPM, pulling you through to about 3,500 to 4,000. Then as you begin to expand your configuration palette, Triumph, I'm sure you've heard of Triumph motorcycles.
Sure.
They're known for their triples. So it's an inline 3-cylinder. Ducati and both Aprilia sell V4 engine configurations now that kind of blend the torquiness of a V-twin with the high revving of an inline formation cylinder. So, your typical, you would call them a super sport. So a super sport is a super bike style like this, but with an engine displacement of, 600 cc or 750 cc. An inline engine configuration is going to rev to a really high RPM, anywhere from, 14 to 17,000 RPM. But where's the trade-off? If you find yourself at a high gear, let's say, 5 or, 5th or 6th gear, and you're rolling at 35 miles an hour, once you give it gas, that engine needs to build some speed to get to the higher part of the rev range where it makes power. So, and a lot of, let's say, the mid-range sports bikes that are sold today. So a lot of the Yamaha MT-07s, the MT-09s, the Yamaha R7s, the R9s, they are all parallel configuration engines that kind of make a uniform build of power, not necessarily torquey like a V-twin, not necessarily high revving like an inline, kind of a middle ground.
So we call these sport bikes or race bikes, or what's the proper terminology here?
So I would consider these sports bikes. If you want to get a bit more technical, you could refer to them as super bikes. The word super bike references a racing class, which means the engine displacement is 1,000 cc's, right? But we've seen that category really grow, especially with the introduction of, you now have 400 cc sports bikes that are both, Kawasaki is selling them, KTM is selling them, Yamaha is selling an R3, Honda's made a CBR, I believe 400 as well. That has provided an opportunity to get into the sport and get into riding at a much lower economical level. You can buy a Kawasaki Ninja 400 for around $4,000 or $5,000 rather than the high-end Kawasaki ZX-10R for 15 or 20 grand. You know what I mean? So you can kind of graduate into it rather than jumping into the deep end.
I mean, this is something I think. Well, if you're a biker, right? If you're on a bike, you probably realize that it's a different world than my world, right? Because I'm in the touring world, right? I have this Harley and I tour around with people and I'm out there, enjoying nature and things like that. But the sport bike world it's a totally different place than the touring world. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I personally love about motorcycles in comparisons to cars is that a motorcycle does a really good job of telling you how it wants to be ridden, right? So if you give me your tour, something about the ergonomics of a bagger is automatically going to put you in a mindset of cruising speed, not so much aggression in regards to maneuverability, kind of enjoying the power band, where when you get on a motorcycle, on a sports bike like these, everything just kind of gets dialed up a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Probably the guiltiest pleasure of mine. I've spent a lot of time in Europe, for both business and personal. I had the opportunity. I rented a BMW, GS 1250 for a weekend, just kind of going around some lake and mountain roads in northern Italy, and that was within 70 to 80% of the pleasure that I get of riding a sports bike within the speed limit. The nice thing about a sports bike is this is in my opinion, the ultimate expression of my hobby of motorcycling. The problem is it comes with its risks and its expenses, right? So in order for me to utilize these motorcycles to the best of their capability, you need a racetrack. That's going to come with time. That's going to come with money. That's going to come with ability. But your ability to take your cruiser and go on a road trip, that's just a matter of setting up a group chat, who's in for a ride, hit the road and come back. So that's my justification to having multiple types of motorcycles.
So have you had these on the track? Did you go on the track with these?
So these two specific bikes I haven't had on the track. Between the two of them, probably I would like to bring out the Aprilia, the black one, simply because I've done some specific suspension modification to it, to my physical size. Motorcycles basically come out of the factory as one size fits all. I'm built to play American football and not European football, so the suspension kind of needs some help coping with me. But it would probably be the Aprilia. But I've had a history of let's say built race bikes that were, they weren't street legal, no headlights, no brake lights, no kickstands. The only place that I could actually literally use it was a racetrack, and it was a dedicated tool just for doing that.
So you've been on a track. I mean, it sounds like you've been on a track at least.
Yeah, I am proud of the fact that I am not the fastest guy you'll meet at a racetrack, but I consider myself competent. So, the home track for people who live in the tri-state area, you're either going up upstate to Monticello, which is actually a private track. You would go up to New York safety track. You would go down to New Jersey Motorsport Park. There's 2 racetracks on that property. It's Thunderbolt and Lightning. Thunderbolt, and I've been to both of those racetracks probably, a dozen or so times each. I've been fortunate enough. I've been to Laguna Seca in California. They run World Superbike. They run MotoGP there. I've been to Misano in Italy where they run MotoGP. I've been to Mugello in Italy where they run MotoGP. I've done some track days in Almeria in the south of Spain. I've done some track days in Florida as well at Jennings. It's a smaller local track. So I've been fortunate enough to kind of ride a bunch of different tracks. Like I said, I'm not the fastest, but I'm competent and capable enough where I can kind of look at a track map, see where I am, and I'm really good at kind of getting out of the way.
That's the thing. A lot of people think, when they're watching, I've been with a group of people and they're watching these races around the track and things, and they say, well, whoever has the fastest bike is going to win. And I'm trying to explain, look, there's a lot more to racing a bike than just how fast the bike is. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know of many other, I would compare the physicality of motorcycle racing. It's probably more similar to downhill skiing than it is car racing. You know what I mean? Like if I had to think of car racing, I think car racers and motorcycle racers have a lot in common in regards to the physical feedback that they get from the vehicle in regards to losing traction or steering. But the impact of your physical body in regards to your body positioning, your weight, your ability to change direction, that has just as much of an impact. And to be honest, courage and ability. Like you said, I have been on a racetrack with a motorcycle that makes, 180 horsepower, and I've been embarrassed plenty of times by guys on motorcycles that have 50 horsepower. And in the end, there's no replacement for mileage, just like anything else. Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. The more time you can put in, the more competent you are at it.
So the things you wear, I mean, I see in the background there's a bunch of stuff back there, but I'm imagining, look, in the touring world, at least they say dress for the slide, not the ride. Right. And so a lot of protective gear and stuff. Of course, you're always going to get a guy that's going to wear a t-shirt. But can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the similarities or differences there are between the type of riding that you do and touring? I mean, as far as clothes go and preparation and things like that.
Yeah, I think really where the differences are probably, the most important thing is probably waist down, right? So when going on a racetrack, and now this is of course with money being no object. First of all, any organization that's hosting a track day or doing racing, you have to show up in either a one-piece leather suit, or it's a leather jacket and leather pants that have to be zippered at the waist so they don't have the ability to separate from one another. If it's typically 95% of the guys there in a one-piece leather suit. The leather suits are similar to your touring jackets in regards to the CE cushioning. We'll have that. You'll have that in your shoulders. You have it in your elbows. You might have it in your chest as well. You have to wear a back protector, whether you wear that as a separate vest or it's found within the suit. So like you said, dress for the slide. It's all about the dispersion of energy, right? So the second you hit the ground, that's got to expel somewhere. And now technology has gotten to the point where race suits, you have the choice, but race suits are also coming with airbag systems. So when they feel I believe they're triggered either by impact or certain G-force, you'll basically inflate in and around your shoulders because, guys who are fortunate enough to walk away from what you would consider on a racetrack you have two crashes. You have high sides, you have low sides, right? So low side meaning that, you find yourself in a corner, you have a sudden impact on the suspension, you lose the grip, bike slides and you slide with it. Usually the first thing to go injury-wise, collarbone. It takes the least amount of pressure to crack. So, the airbag kind of helps suppress that impact into the airbag rather than your physical body. On the racetrack, you're going to wear full face helmet, no modulars, obviously no 3/4. Full face helmets have to be at least DOT approved, like they have to be on the road. You also have secondary certification levels that you can shop for. So DOT is the US standard. ECE is the European standard. And then SNELL, SNELL, I don't know what certification they're up to. I don't know if it's 2020 or 2022, which is, I think it's a secondary body that certifies a superior level of safety.
Right. And then you have the CE ratings, like you were saying before, for the safety gear, for the cushions, right? The CE1, CE2.
Correct. And then, gloves past the wrist, your race suit is going to tuck into them. Boots wise, above the ankle, your suit is going to tuck into them. Your back protector on the inside. And then obviously, the thing that's always most impressive to people, and it blows me away as well. We have knee pucks, right? So, the harder you would think that it's the aggression at which you're taking a turn, but the reason why motorcycle riders on a racetrack are hanging off a bike is simply using your body as leverage to lean the bike over, but also minimizing the lean angle of the motorcycle. So motorcycle riders on a racetrack will use the contact that's made with the knee slider, which in the end is just a solid piece of rubber like a hockey puck. So it doesn't actually catch. It's just abrasive. You use that to gauge how big of an angle you're leaned over and how much more you could actually go. And the MotoGP riders, so basically, the world-class, sports bikes, they are turning low enough that they are not only dragging their knees, but they're making contact with their elbows and their shoulders as well.
I can't imagine that. But you're talking about like when we see a typical picture of these, somebody racing a motorcycle and their knees are literally scraping the ground, right? I mean, that's not whatever, like 150 miles an hour.
I'll share it with you. But it's you could look up just MotoGP. The racetrack is Catalunya, and the turn is turn 9, and they're achieving anywhere from a 61 to 63 degree lean angle. It's that's why the cream of the crop in professional races are usually referred to as aliens, simply based on that ability.
All right, just to give you a frame of reference, I mean, you're talking about how far you're going to lean from one side to another. These guys are going more than 60 degrees over. The maximum on my touring motorcycle, I think, is 27 degrees, and with all the stuff I have on it, with all the the footboards and stuff, it's maybe 25 at best. I don't know, but oh my God, that's just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, but that's, I think that's the beauty. That's the beauty of the hobby, right? So I can imagine enjoying the ride to the racetrack on your touring bike, and then wake up the next day and hit a full day's worth of track day, just trying to set best lap times and so forth, and then 2 or 3 days later hopping on a 150cc Vespa, just kind of bombing around Manhattan and taking care of errands. You know what I mean? They're multi-tools for multi-uses.
Yeah, it depends on your mood, right? It depends on your mood. One bike for every mood. That's what I say.
Listen, if I had more space, I'd have more problems. But for right now, it's these two guys that I've got.
So I have some ideas in my mind about this following question that I'd like to know, in your opinion, what do you think is safer? Do you think touring is a safer way to ride motorcycles, or you think the sport racing is a little more safer, let's call it, than riding touring?
Richard, I had to be honest. I think it depends on the rider. You know what I mean? I think the fact that there are definitely a good number of riders that are just getting into motorcycling for whatever inspirations or reasons they have. and are naturally finding themselves kind of pushing the threshold of their personal capacity or the equipment's capacity, that's someone that could afford to have a humbling experience in a safer environment like a racetrack, right? Where, somebody like yourself, you might just not have, an itch of adrenaline or a curiosity to explore that level of performance or competition, where, safety is really in the context of how you define it, right? So, I think with touring, and just like whether you're on a racetrack or whether you're going on a road trip, there's organizations out there. One that comes to mind is YCRS, Yamaha Championship Racing School. They're down in Millville, New Jersey, at New Jersey Motorsport Park, and they do a 2-day riding course on a racetrack. But they conduct that class to people who have Gold Wings, people that have GSs, people that have Dynaglides. Simply to teach you the fundamentals of, body positioning, the values of trail baking, the impacts of target fixation. All of that is going to make you a better rider, regardless of where and how you're riding, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's that all plays a part in it, and very, very well put. Very well put. I'd imagine maintenance has to play some sort of role in safety too. I don't know if you do your own maintenance or you have to bring it into somewhere special to have your bikes maintained.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to maintenance from for my general maintenance, kind of the easy to intermediate stuff, in regards to getting wheels off the physical motorcycle to get tires changed by somebody else, oil levels, making some adjustments in regards to foot pegs and levers, taking body work off to kind of just make sure everything's kind of nice and nipped and tucked, I can take care of. When it comes to, valve clearances, this is a belt driven timing system. So, that's better put into the hands of experts. But especially in the world of track days and motorcycle racing, number one priority, you mentioned it before, in apparel, as you get deeper and deeper into competitive motorcycle riding, not only do you want to dress for the crash, but you want to build for the crash as well, right? So when you think of components on a motorcycle like handlebars, so like we mentioned before, in the best case scenario where you have a low side, right? So you go into a corner, you lose the front grip, bike slides out from you. What are the first things to go? Handlebars, foot pegs. So you have, and what are referred to handlebars are referred to as clip-ons with sports bikes, and your foot pegs are basically considered rear sets. So those are aftermarket accessories that you basically are packing and have accessible to you in the scenario where you have, quite simply, a low side that you need to repair at the racetrack. Also, just like your side bags or your body work, typically guys who are out racing on weekends are replacing the factory body work with aftermarket plastic body work. Mm-hmm. So it's not clear coated, it's not painted. You throw a couple of stickers on it, but the nice thing is, if you go down, it's not as pretty as it was before you did, but it doesn't look that bad either. So that's where the advantage is you're building it for the crash. Ironically, though, you are eliminating more and more of your potential usages of it outside of a racetrack, right? Yeah. So it's kind of, and of course, when you're riding a motorcycle at that level of intensity, maintenance just becomes more frequent. So if you're doing, 2 days worth of track days, instead of doing an oil change every 3,000 miles or 5,000 miles or once a season, you're probably doing it at the end of a race weekend. You're going to wear out chains and you're going to wear out sprockets sooner than you would a regular bike. So there's no special maintenance. I would say the frequency of maintenance, those intervals are much shorter when riding at that speed.
Yeah, you're really pushing the sport bikes to their limits, So I'd imagine you really have to be on top of that.
Yeah, well, and the good thing is, racetracks are track days or privateer club racing. They're all run by organizations that have very stringent safety regulations. So you have to go through what's called a tech inspection. So before you're allowed to go out on a racetrack, you have at least 2 people physically inspecting the bike. So they're checking the bike to see what your brake pad levels are, to see whether or not your throttle catches, just kind of, with the bike being off, they'll basically rev it and let go to see whether or not that throttle is sticking or whether it's nice and smooth. They'll see if your exhaust is loose or whether it's tight, if there's too much slack in your chain. They're going to check if your foot pegs are loose or your handlebars are loose. They're going to check your physical equipment. So they're going to do the best that they can to minimize any risk that's out on the racetrack, simply because, especially the faster you are and the more competent you are, the more the closer the proximity is to other people going fast. So, if I didn't do a good job of changing my oil and my oil filter's loose, and now all of a sudden I'm spitting oil onto a racetrack, well, in the middle of a turn, that's not going to help anybody, right?
Yeah.
And then we all lose time because now there's oil on the racetrack. The track gets shut down. Somebody's got to go out there. They have to dust it. They have to absorb the oil. They have to blow it off. It impedes everybody's time. So, everybody's operating at a certain level of scrutiny and safety to maximize safety.
Yeah, this is a complete different world for me, and you really opened my eyes, and you've given us so much information about this world, because I know touring, and one motorcycle rider is not like another motorcycle rider necessarily, and I think you really spoke to that point. I'm a touring guy, you're a sport guy. I mean, we both ride bikes, but this is just something I really had no idea about it. It's a pretty exciting world. So I really appreciate you opening my eyes, and I'm sure everybody else really appreciates all the information and all your time you spent with us. I mean, the bikes are beautiful, and you're really lucky to have such a spacious garage there. You could fit them in. I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie.
Well, this is, I'm fortunate enough where, my wife and I are on the same page in regards to, hobbies and space. It looks much more spacious. The garage looks more spacious than it does on camera. I only have space for 2 of them. So, it's a constant 18 to 24 month itch to scratch about, okay, what do I want to try now? And, which one am I going to sell? What do I want to take on? And really, the practicality of it. But, Richard, what you touched on, we both share and can kind of hit a nerve to the same sensation, right? Although how it manifests itself is different, the tool we use to achieve it is the same. So if you're going on if you're going on a back-to-back days, worth of riding, whether it's a sunset that you're catching, or you found, that you and your group found that nice 5-mile road where you don't have to think about it. You could just sit in the same gear and kind of follow each other, and ride through it. Or, I can think of, certain days of certain tracks where, I'm spending an entire day just focusing on taking one corner correctly. I'm just focusing on turn 4. I just got to get turn 4 right. And then, you try, you go in a little faster, you brake a little later, you get on the gas a little earlier. And then finally, one section, it just hits, right? You and I are sharing the same sensation, utilizing the same tool that might be in a different shape, but we're speaking the same language at the end of the day.
I really hope I have the pleasure of riding with you sometime. Maybe we'll have to switch bikes or something like that. I don't know. I'll probably stall in your driveway.
We'll see what I've got in the garage, but I'm never somebody to stray away from a ride. So I'm definitely looking forward to meeting up and going out for one.
All right, and we'll capture it on camera. So next episode, you and me, we're going to capture it on camera. You can laugh at me when I stall in your driveway.
I got plenty of photography equipment, so I'm excited to have a giggle and buy you a coffee.
All right, man. Listen, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time and your insight. It's really invaluable. And thanks for educating all the listeners, and especially me. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to put some information down below. Some of the things you mentioned, like some of the tracks and stuff like that, the one in Catalunya, and some stuff about MotoGP. And we're going to put all that interesting stuff down. If you're a YouTube listener, it's going to be down there. And we'll make it available to the podcast listeners too. But thanks so much for coming in and spending time with us.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Absolutely.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Riding Counsel with Richard Jaffe. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your fellow riders. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and ride safe.